Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Crowded Booth Live. Hope you're having a fantastic week. We're at a part of the year in the calendar that it is basketball is ending. Fantastic games we had this past weekend, by the way. I don't know if you were able to tune in. We're going to talk a little about some NCAA basketball. And then for you baseball fans, the end of the week is going to bring the much anticipated return of Major League Baseball. I know a lot of Braves fans in our area are excited for that, and we're excited to talk about that. But first, we're going to bring on a good friend and an Alabama insider. We'll name him that, William Galloway. William, how you doing today, sir?
Bryce, I'll take the title. Appreciate it. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it, man. Well, listen, you made your way up to Indianapolis, and I know I shot you a DM yesterday, and I said, I know it didn't turn out the way that Alabama fans had hoped for, but could you first off just kind of walk me through what this season has meant on campus and for a program that I don't want to say they haven't had a ton of success, but that's an athletic program that is dominating on a lot of different fields and a lot of different courts, and basketball is just kind of one of the next in line to really experience that.
Yeah, it was a special year for sure. I mean, you think about year two under Nate Oates, and you look at past coaches, Anthony Grant, Avery Johnson, what they did in year two versus what Nate Oates did in year two, and it's really unprecedented. And that's a word that a lot of people have used this year, talking about the coronavirus pandemic and unprecedented. Well, let me tell you what, Alabama basketball this year going 26-7 in the second year under a coach that comes out of the MAC conference to Tuscaloosa, recruits some great talent. They have a great year, winning the SEC regular season and then tournament championship, winning 8 of their last 9 games, going on a 10-game winning streak, a majority of that in the regular season that stretched for mostly SEC games. It was just a phenomenal year, a historic year, making the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2004. Just an unbelievable year, following in the footsteps of a football national championship. All eyes turned towards basketball, and Nate Oates lived up to the hype and had a fantastic, very memorable year. And they fell just short of the Elite Eight in a tough game on Sunday night up in Indianapolis.
I know that you were in attendance. How many fans were students able to make that trip up? What was the atmosphere like in Indianapolis for Alabama fans?
So first of all, Indianapolis, I mean, it was really special having a tournament bubble format like that in a state that loves its basketball. It's rich in basketball tradition. I think the capacity was set around 16 or 1,700. And the way it was, just like you see the screen here, I mean, it was split right down the middle. So you had UCLA fans from where I was sitting on the right side of the court, Alabama fans on the left side of the court. The infamous Alabama chant that they do at football games, we're able to do from one side of Hinkle Fieldhouse to the other. That's another thing. Playing in Hinkle Fieldhouse was really special. It was the second time that Alabama got to play in Hinkle in the tournament, and a little bit smaller of a venue, not Bankers Life where the Pacers play, but it was historic, and it was crowded. Relatively crowded. I mean, you could kind of feel the energy. Everybody was safely spaced out, but it was loud. And while it was half and half, you could kind of tell that Alabama fans brought more energy. And a lot of people were surprised. Outsiders were surprised. Michigan fans, I talked to one guy one morning in the hotel who's a Michigan fan. He was shocked at how many Crimson Tide script A's he was seeing on the street. It was just a really great basketball environment and a special basketball city, a really great thing for the players and the coaches of the programs that were able to make the tournament this year. And one thing I'll add as well, talking about this year's tournament, is Alabama making history and making the Sweet 16, as I mentioned earlier, something that hadn't been done since 2004. A run over the legendary Rick Pitino in the first round of the tournament. Nate Oates had never met Rick Pitino. Alabama defeated Iona 68-55, and then Maryland, Alabama got hot from beyond the arc, winning 96-77 over the Terps, and former Alabama player Galen Smith, who played for Maryland as well. So it was just a really special year, special tournament, and a fun experience. I wish Alabama was playing tonight. Obviously, doing the show on Tuesday, Crimson Tide would be playing versus Michigan in that Elite Eight game. However, it did not end up like they wanted. Bryce, are you there? All right. Well, I guess something's up here. I'll continue to talk about the NCAA tournament run. I want to focus on, go back to the round of 32, Bama's game versus Maryland. I talked about the hot shooting. John Petty kind of was able to hit his stride, making shots. Finally, he struggled in that first game versus Iona, but that game versus Maryland, when Bama was able to catch fire, especially in the second half, after that game, a lot of people were saying, this is an Alabama team that if they get hot, reading some comments here, they can beat anybody in the country. And the thing about the tournament that's special is that it's hard to do. You got to win 6 games. You got to play 48 hours right after you win, generally, in these second, the round of 32, and then the Elite Eight, and then what would be the championship game. And it's hard to have a perfect 6-game run. Auburn was able to get 5 games of really good basketball a couple years ago in the NCAA tournament, made it all the way to the Final Four. Alabama has had some games where they haven't played that well, and UCLA was one of those games. But a little bit of a slip up, and that's okay because it was a special year, and Alabama was a really good team. Ran into a tough UCLA team, well-coached Mick Cronin. They were physical. It went all the way down to the end. Obviously, Alex Reese's shot was historic. I remember just grabbing and bear hugging the guy next to me because that was a play that will go down in Alabama fame, even though that the Crimson Tide fell just short against UCLA. I had something happen with Bryce's camera. Hopefully he can rejoin us here soon. But moving on, what else he wanted me to talk about is Alabama football. So the Alabama Crimson Tide Pro Day happened today. It was the second Pro Day. They had one last week. Mac Jones and Najee Harris were kind of the feature guys. It was on the SEC Network, the Crimson Tide. It was over in the Malmore Hank Crisp Indoor Athletic Facility here in Tuscaloosa. Mac Jones threw a bunch of balls. Devontae Smith was catching. He did not do drills, but he was there to support Mac Jones and catch some balls. There's really, and they were saying this on the SEC Network telecast, there's nothing really Devontae Smith can do anymore to elevate his draft status. But I think Mac Jones did a lot of good today, not only in passing, but the drills, his footwork. Coaches got to see that. Bill Belichick, Sean Payton, Kyle Shanahan was there, so it was a good showing from NFL head coaches looking at Mac Jones, and really interesting time of year as basketball wraps up and spring kind of kicks into baseball. Alabama baseball trying to make a run through SEC play, but football mainly is kind of the focus here in Tuscaloosa. In Alabama football, you can talk about it year round, and that's what we're doing obviously right here. The Crimson Tide looking towards the draft less than a month away now, and Mac Jones really trying to elevate his status. One thing about Mac is that he's such a good leader and a good teammate, and the way that he performed today, there were a couple drop balls, a couple deep balls that were just overthrown a little bit, and you'd see him running up to the guys. Some of them were younger guys. I think Devontae and Miller Forrestall caught everything that came their way, but he would coach those guys up and he'd say either my bad or, hey, when you're running your route, it was miscommunication here. He would talk to different people. So Bryce, welcome.
There we go. There we go. You had to take over the show for a second. That was wild, but you did it. And listen, I got a text from one of the guys backstage. He said, you did it with grace. You're a professional. You've done this before, so I appreciate you. But please continue talking about the pro day. That's what we'll talk about now.
Yeah, and so I was just saying, Mac was making plays, and on even ones that he wasn't fully making the right plays, whether it was an overthrow or a drop by the receiver, he was coaching up the guys. He was encouraging to everybody that needed to be encouraged. And that's one thing I think that goes a long way in the NFL is coachability and how he gets along with receivers. And he's not pointing fingers saying that's a drop ball, that's on you. He's working with his receivers. And that's one thing I noticed today on the SEC Network on Alabama's Pro Day.
Yeah, obviously it was widely broadcasted. I think, I don't even know if you mentioned this, but you mentioned Landon Dickerson with the cartwheels.
Yes.
So
yes,
is he full? What's the status on him? Wild. What's the status on him? I mean, obviously he looks great out there, but this is a guy who could provide, I feel like obviously not an early day pick or anything like that, but he could be very valuable going forward.
Oh, for sure. He's a guy that came to Alabama from Florida State, and everybody said, who is this guy? And then in that first game against Duke, he's acting up on the sidelines. He's one of those, if he's on your team, you love him, and if he's not on your team, you hate him. But he brings a lot of character, a lot of personality to the locker room, and that's something that kind of sets linemen apart because no lineman is really as outspoken as he is, especially in the college game, and I think that'll definitely translate to the NFL. But his blocking ability and the run game and the passing game is something that we just haven't seen in a player that's come through Alabama in years. And there's been tremendous offensive line play. I mean, you talk about all the Joe Moore awards, and recently Alabama was presented with that Joe Moore award at the facility here in Tuscaloosa. Just his ability to just bully people physically and to really not, take crap from anybody, any defensive lineman, defensive end. He's just so big. He's so physical. He's fast on his feet, and he's going to be a great asset to whoever is going to pick him up.
Yeah, I think what you talked about, just his someone I talked to as an Alabama, they said this spunk, what he brings, his swagger that he has on the field goes a long way. We'll let you, you had to carry the show, so I won't keep you too much longer, but I want to talk to you. So maybe some spring football updates. Obviously Pro Day was happening. William, who are some people that the Crimson Tide fans should be looking forward to? Maybe there's some big names. Maybe there's some people they hadn't quite heard of yet.
Well, first and foremost, we just talked about Mac Jones and his pro day. So who's going to replace him? And obviously the front runner, the most talented guy that Alabama has right now with experience is Bryce Young. Well, Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of Texas, 5-star early enrollee, is somebody to keep an eye on. This job is really anybody's. It's Paul Tyson's, it's Bryce Young's, it's Jalen Milroe. There's a lot of leadership that's returning on this team at all positions, really. There's going to be a lot of questions about receivers because you're losing Devontae Smith. Obviously, in recent years, you've lost Ruggs and Judy, even going back a couple more years, and Calvin Ridley. But there's always been kind of the next man up. And so John Mechie is going to be that guy. Slade Bolden has the experience. Another couple names, I'll just go through a couple positions here. Running back Brian Robinson coming back for his 5th year. He's not only going to be an asset for Alabama. He's a Tuscaloosa native, but he's going to be a leader. I mean, he's been on multiple national championship playing fields, has multiple rings, SEC championships, and things like that. He's going to be a great asset for Alabama on and off the field. Defensive line, you're losing Christian Barmore, a guy that really came on strong last year as part of Alabama's front seven. But you get guys back and this, I think defensive line is going to be Alabama's strong suit. LeBron Ray, Fedarian Mathis, DJ Dale, Justin Eboigbe, just such a strong front defensive line for Alabama. And how are those guys, not only on the defensive line, but everybody at all their positions going to do with a coaching turnover? Because, Bryce, we know that coaching turnover happens every year in Tuscaloosa, but Alabama was hit especially hard this year.
Yeah, it seems every single year they're rotating new names in there. And I'll tell you one thing, and from our perspective across the Chattahoochee River, it's a machine, a well-oiled machine at this point over in Tuscaloosa. So, William, we appreciate you coming on. You carried the show for a little bit, but you have your own podcast. Where can people find you, and where can they find your podcast as well?
For sure, yeah. I'm the weekend sports anchor here for a couple more weeks at WVUA 23. That's our campus TV station, conveniently located inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, which is fun. So people say, where do you work? Have you ever seen Bryant-Denny? But yeah, the Galloway podcast, Gallo-Way, is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as SoundCloud. It's weekly in football season. It's now every other week, generally talking hoops, talking what's new in sports, interview-based podcasts with various guests. And just talking all things sports, really. I mean, there's so many sports podcasts out there, but it's feature-based, based on the guest. Once again, the Galloway podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, as well as SoundCloud. And Bryce, I appreciate you making some time for me to come on today. I'm sorry about the technical difficulty, but I'm happy to to join and help you out. Are you there, Bryce? I've got a frozen left screen. We're kind of like Alabama's free throw shooting right now on Sunday night. We're a little bit frozen. I hope I'm there. Our live meter says we're still rolling. I'm going to wait for Bryce to get back and continue to talk a little bit Alabama football, but we can also talk a little bit Alabama basketball as well. I want to talk about the experience as we wait for Bryce to come back here on the crowded booth. The experience of the bubble in Indianapolis. The players were in the JW Marriott. It was about 20, 25 mile an hour winds when I got up there on Sunday afternoon. It was absolutely crazy. I mean, the environment up there, it's cold. You know, it's definitely not the South. Like I said, it was a special bubble type format, and the entire city was set up around the bubble. Now, you had the players in one hotel, you had fans everywhere. There's hotels, and there's an abundance of hotels. Most gyms besides Hinkle Fieldhouse were within walking distance. And like I said, Hinkle Fieldhouse is just really a special place, obviously where Hoosiers was filmed. But like I said, 1,700 or 1,800 seating capacity, and you had it split right down the middle. You walk in Hinkle Fieldhouse, and it's built a lot like Coleman Coliseum. I'm not sure if viewers here have been in or seen Coleman Coliseum, but it's like a long field house looking like a football indoor practice facility. And with the length going this way, you have the court this way. So you have the baselines very deep in the stands, shallow baselines and deep sidelines. That's kind of how the format of it, Hinkle Fieldhouse was set up, but not a bad seat in the house, honestly. It was a really good experience, fair prices, and I'll say that it's better than Banker's Life. You know, paying $4 for popcorn, not paying $11 for popcorn. But as the Elite Eight comes, they're playing two games last night. Oregon State and Houston. Houston won, and then Baylor beat Arkansas. So Baylor and Houston advancing to the Final Four. UCLA taking on Michigan tonight, and then Gonzaga taking on USC. I think Gonzaga's going to roll that one. I think Michigan can handle UCLA as well. UCLA is playing well right now, but they're going to have a near perfect game, and that's what they did on against Alabama on Sunday. Alabama had a little bit of a slip up, so we are having technical difficulties now. I'm going to step out, and we will be right back. This is the Crowd.
Hello, we are back. Wow, that was absolutely crazy. We appreciate William for taking control of the crowded booth for a little bit. William's fantastic, as we talked about. And hey, he's for hire as well. So if you're watching and you wanted to hire him, he's doing a great job. We appreciate William for coming on and talking. We're going to take a quick commercial break while we gather some things, make sure we have everything ready to roll, and then we're going to roll into some great conversation to end off our night. We thank everyone for staying tuned among all of the technical difficulties that we were having. We apologize for that. And you will hear from one of our good time local sponsors right now.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?